Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. My name is Cameron. This is the Cameron Journal News Hour. If you are watching this for the first time, or if you're new, um, my name is Cameron. If you want to find all my social links, head over to CameronJournal.com. If you are not getting my Saturday newsletter delivered to your inbox, you are missing out because I do exclusive content on 3 or 4 news stories. I also talk about personal updates, and there's links to my courses and other stuff. I also send out this show and the interview and great articles from the Cameron Journal each week. So if you don't have time but you want to keep up, the newsletter is the best way. Head over to CameronJournal.com. If you click on newsletter right in the top navigation bar, or just go to CameronJournal.com/newsletter, you can sign up really easy. I wanted to promote that because I made that new sign up page today. So I wanted to make sure to mention it. So if you haven't signed up, please make sure to sign up because it's a really great way to get all of my stuff just delivered right to you. We have a bunch of news stories this week, and I have not properly prepared. I got caught up on the phone with some different things, so I did not have a chance to get all everything open. So I'm gonna do that right now while we're talking. But it was a good weekend. I slept a lot, felt 20 million billion times better. Took some time off from everything. It was obviously kind of the end and beginning of a month. I hate a month that starts in the middle of the week, by the way. It throws off my whole program. Like, the Mondays on the 5th? No. Like, the 1st was last week? What are you talking about? But it was still in middle of, so it was just nice to have some time. For years and years and years and years and years, I always worked weekends. Like, especially when I was in grad school and everything, I always worked weekends, especially Saturdays. I would usually always take off on Sunday, but I would definitely always work Saturdays. Now, I still will take calls on Saturday. I don't take appointments on the weekend, but I will take calls on Saturday. I will do some stuff on Saturday. I'll clean up from the week and all this type of thing. I've been planning some new stuff around the release of my next book, and we're working on some great things at Soup. But I had a bunch of recordings on Friday, and I just crashed out. It was kind of sad. But it was good and very restful. I kind of had realized a little while ago that since I graduated from my MFA program in 2023, I literally had not had a lot of time off or time to think. Much less kind of anything else. And so it's been a kind of a process of becoming, in terms of really, really readjusting to, life outside of, grad school and the pandemic. And in the middle of that, I also was diagnosed with autism and was going on that whole journey, and that was a whole thing. And so it was a lot in a very sort of short period of time, and it was and so it's been, and I also moved across the country in there as well, and so it was just kind of a lot all at once, and I just have not had a chance to breathe. And life is still very busy, obviously, but I wanted to still, I still needed some chance and opportunity to just breathe and take, a minute to myself for just everything that has gone on, everything that has happened. And that's kind of what's been on my mind, is I feel like I'm in a lot of review right now. I did spend some time over the weekend kind of looking through old bookmarks, kind of planning my next move with this show, with this brand, and just trying to grow. We've gotten a lot of new people in, we really have, compared to even 2 or 3 years ago. bigger, better, badder, more popular than ever before. But it's definitely I'm at an inflection point sort of thing. And so I was just kind of going through, all of that and thinking through, kind of what comes next um, and it's a bit of a transition right now, trying to figure out what's the future of this show, what comes, what are we going to keep doing, what does this, look like, and all this sort of thing. Yeah, it's been an interesting thought process. I don't have a lot more to say because I'm not done with that thought process yet, but I will remind everyone that if you do love this show and you love the newsletter and you love what I do, please sign up for Cameron Journal Plus, which you can sign up by going to CameronJournal.com/subscribe. We have had some new people subscribe lately, so thank you, Cameron Journal Plus subscribers. We love you. But if you want to support this, it's $5 a month, which is great. It's very accessible. And it makes this all possible, which is really, really awesome. So if you'll notice, my website is ad-free, which may not be true for very much longer if we don't get some more subscribers. So tell your friends, subscribe yourself. And because if you aren't, then I'm going to have to start, looking at ad companies. So we want to keep the ads off. We want to keep things open and accessible and not paywalled. A lot of leftist sites have a very bad habit of having things always paywalled. And so the right-wing sites don't. And I try to counteract that by not having paywalls myself. But that also means I need to either get ads or more subscribers or whatever have you, need to get some money transacting here. So if you want to see fewer ads, no ads, you want to keep the no ad status, make sure to subscribe and tell your friends. That's what you just send for the newsletter. Forward the newsletter, they love it, they subscribe, we're all happy. So, enough of that. Let's turn to the headlines. Let me click this button here. And here we go. So, we have a bunch of stuff up here in no particular order. But I want to start with the state of international travel. So, there has been kind of a rumor going around that, people aren't coming to the U.S., tourism is collapsing, a lot of the airlines are complaining, hotels are complaining, Disney's complaining, all this type of thing. And so, when this article came out, I thought it would be good to review, obviously, with what's happening internationally with the trade wars and changes in geopolitics, and it's been a very busy 100 days of the Trump administration. I thought it would be good to kind of look at this and be like, well, let's look at some actual numbers and kind of see where we're at. And so travel compared to last year, we are down 1.5% international arrivals at U.S. airports. Summer flight bookings from Europe are down 2%. Summer flight bookings from Asia are up 4%, so yay, more Asian people. And summer flight bookings from Canada have plummeted. It says here, between a global trade war and canceled visas and tourists detained at the border, signals from the United States have been anything but inviting to potential visitors. Many news outlets have reported extraordinary declines in international visitors during the new Trump administration, especially from Europe. But despite some ominous signs, a close look at the data shows that travel to the United States is largely holding up, at least so far. Nearly as many foreign travelers have arrived at American airports this year than during the same period last year, according to an analysis by the New York Times of entry data collected from every international airport in the country. International arrivals did drop more than 10% in March compared with last year, but this was largely because Easter fell unusually late this year, pushing back a popular travel window for European tourists. More recent figures from April show that travel over the holiday looks similar to previous years. And here we have Easter. Visitors haven't stopped booking summer vacations in the United States, either, with one major exception. Canadians, angered by U.S. tariffs and Trump administration talk of turning their country into a 51st state, really do appear to be boycotting the United States. Ticket sales for travel in summer, a crucial season for the industry, are down 21% compared with last year. The decline in Canadian travelers, who make up roughly a quarter of all foreign visitors, is enough by itself to threaten tourism-oriented businesses in Florida, New York, Maine, and other popular destinations. But sales of tickets for summer travel from the rest of the world are down only 2% compared to the same period last year, according to data on the 25 most popular routes from the Airlines Reporting Corporation, whose data covers about 2/3 of global airline ticket sales. Any decline is worrisome for the travel industry, and the situation could worsen if economies are further weakened by the trade war or if anti-American sentiment rises. There's extraordinary uncertainty among travel analysts about whether visitors will continue to come in the same numbers, and if so, for how long. Part of the explanation for the relatively unchanged arrival figures So far, many land the nature of the travel business. Many international trips are booked months in advance and can be hard to cancel, so even a traveler who feels antagonized by U.S. policies may end up getting on a plane anyway. What we're seeing is that words and actions don't always line up, said Henry Hartfeld, an airline and travel industry analyst. And it goes on, we're not going to read the rest of it, but it has some interesting data where U.S. bound summer flight bookings have decreased, include Canada, Netherlands, Germany, Ecuador, Mexico, Dominican Republic, Switzerland, China, South Korea, India, and Poland, and they're up with people from Argentina, Ireland, Japan, Portugal, Spain, Australia, Brazil, and Costa Rica. And UK, France, Colombia, Italy, Philippines, and Greece stayed about the same. So I thought that was interesting. It's just something where, and again, it's very important. This is a good moment to say this. One of the things that's very important about news narratives is, and the mainstream media is notoriously bad at this, is they like to put out a crisis, something, oh my god, the sky is falling, and then you find out the sky isn't really that falling. So one of the things I try to do, and one of the reasons why I try to stay on certain stories, is to look at things over time. Time and context matter a lot. If you go by the mainstream media headlines, your hair will be perpetually on fire, and the only person getting burnt is you. So, it's very important to look at these stories over time, look at it, and see how the narrative forms. Remember, what do I always say? News is a narrative, that's why they call it a story. One of Cameron's quotables. And it's very important to kind of look at this stuff over time and understand how these narratives form and shape, how they shape our perception. And when you look at this stuff over time, your perception shifts and changes. And so, although it's easy, on a TikTok video or whatever have you to come along and just be kind of like, well, no one's coming to the United States, tourism is collapsing. Well, maybe not yet. This is something important to look at over time. It's, and as the guy points out, these trips were booked a long time ago. They're hard to cancel, and it may be, we may have a different conversation 6 months from now. But that's the point. It sometimes takes time for these narratives to go and develop, and for things to shift and change. So it's important to keep a clear head about it, and this particular headline story situation is a classic case of we have to really look at what's happening, and we have to look at it again 6 months from now and kind of stay in certain stories and see how the narratives develop. So, thank you, Rolling Stone. Yes, I know I have my ad blocker on. I love you. Thank you and good night. Speaking of stories we should keep an eye on, I was surprised Rolling Stone picked this to cover. So Rolling Stone has always had really great political coverage, going back to the 60s. And Rolling Stone tends to cover it in a very similar way to what I do. They tend to cover the really kind of weighty, popular, everyone's talking about it stories. This is not that, and I really kind of wonder why they chose to do this. But here's what's interesting. So, Trump suggests Republicans start expelling Dems from Congress. The president's border czar, Tom Homan, implied that the administration may also target state and local lawmakers who protect migrant communities. This all started because Tom Homan last week was doing an interview in front of the White House, and he had suggested that we may want to arrest, local sheriffs and all this sort of thing. Because I want to read part of the story, and it's not for free on the web, which is fine. We've got new subscription. And he had suggested that, that we might need to arrest people and all this type of thing, and now Trump wants to expel Dems from Congress. And so it says here, President Donald Trump suggested that congressional Republicans should expel Democratic lawmakers from Congress in response to a so far small impeachment push that has not been endorsed by party leadership. In a lengthy Truth Social post published on late Thursday night, the president wrote, quote, "The Democrats are really out of control. They've lost everything, especially their minds. These radical left lunatics are into the impeachment thing again. They've already got two no-name little restricted congressmen, total whack jobs, both throwing the impeachment of Donald J. Trump around. The Republicans should start to think about expelling them from Congress for all the crimes that they have committed, especially around election time. Trump continued, calling Democrats, quote, very dishonest people that won't let our country heal, and, quote, total lowlifes who hate our country and everything it stands for. Perhaps we should start playing this game on them and expel Democrats for the many crimes that they have committed, the president wrote. Democrats are not wholly on board with the idea of impeaching Trump for a third time, with House Democratic Conference Chair Pete Aguilar, Democrat California, telling Semaphore that impeachment is, quote, not an exercise that we're willing to undertake, unquote. Last week, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said impeachment was, quote, too far away to even judge as a viable option for the current moment. There is no evidence that Democrats committed any crimes against Trump, as he claimed in his post on Thursday, mentioning Senator Adam Schiff specifically, but the president has repeatedly made his thirst for revenge clear, and since taking office again has moved to exact it at both through social media directive and through leveraging the hard power of the federal government he now controls. In March, after months of threats on the campaign trail, Trump attempted to undo preemptive pardons granted to members of the January 6th committee, whom Trump had singled out as potential prosecution targets. The pardons that sleepy Joe Biden gave to the unselect committee of political thugs and many others are hereby declared void, vacant, and of no further force or effect, Trump wrote on Truth Social. While no member of Congress has yet been charged by Trump's administration, the White House seems to be getting comfortable with using the justice system to retaliate or make an example of political rivals. The FBI last week made a public show of arresting Milwaukee Judge Hannah Dugan after accusing her of obstructing the arrest of an undocumented migrant. The administration has also launched an investigation into Chris Krebs, the former director of the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, who in 2020 debunked false claims that Trump had lost the election to fraud. The retribution is only just beginning. On Wednesday, White House, quote, border czar Tom Homan was asked by a reporter why the administration doesn't just arrest the leaders of sanctuary cities and sanctuary states for harboring and shielding illegal aliens, actually terrorists from deportation. Homan's response can only be interpreted as a threat. Wait and see what's coming. All very sobering, isn't it? Again, I thought it very interesting that Rolling Stone decided to report on this coming off the Tom Homan story, and I think it, again, thinking about narrative, as we always must, it's an important thing on how to read the news, narrative. It's an interesting narrative, both that he is playing into, especially with, oh, they're just crazy, all this type of thing, and then also some of the real acts that they're taking. It plays into a narrative and an idea of, political retribution is okay, it's normal, and necessary, even, again, where he says, very dishonest people that won't let our country heal. And that is very authoritarian. And one might even use the F word, fascistic. But again, the interesting part of that story is not the facts of the story, which we kind of already knew. It's where it is. That's just putting that out there in terms of, put that in your hat. Like, when you have places like Rolling Stone reporting on this stuff, that tells us a lot about where the mood is at, how high profile this stuff is going, what kind of attention it's starting to get, all this type of thing. And I think part of it is trying to understand if people will tolerate it. We're early days in the Trump presidency. We don't know yet how much people are willing to tolerate of this, and how soon public opinion, how soon the public's tolerance for this may run out, which I think is very interesting. Oh, this is a feel-good story. This is fun. Okay, so from the New York Times. This was circulating on social media this weekend, and I thought it was fascinating. A universal antivenom may grow out of a man who let snakes bite him 200 times. Says here, scientists identified antibodies that neutralize the poison in whole or in part from the bites of cobras, mambas, and other deadly species. The video is just under 2.5 minutes long. A slim man with close cropped hair walks into a room, pulls a long black mamba, whose venom can kill within an hour, from a crate and allows it to bite his left arm. Immediately after, he lets a tapin from Papua New Guinea bite his right arm. Thanks for watching, he calmly tells the camera, his left arm bleeding, and then exits. Over nearly 18 years, this man, Tim Freed, 57, injected himself with more than 650 carefully calibrated, escalating doses of venom to build his immunity to 16 deadly snake species. He also allowed the snakes, mostly one at a time, but sometimes two as in the video, to sink their sharp fangs into him about 200 times. This bit of daredevilry, one name for it, may now help solve a dire global health problem. More than 600 species of venomous snakes roam the earth, biting as many as 2.7 million people, killing about 120,000 people, and maiming 400,000 others, numbers thought to be vast underestimates. Mr. Freed's blood, scientists say they have identified antibodies that are capable of neutralizing the venom of multiple snake species, a step towards creating a universal antivenom, they reported on Friday in the journal Cell. I'm really proud that I can do something in life for humanity to make a difference for people that are 8,000 miles away, that I'm never going to meet, never going to talk to, never going to see, probably, said Mr. Freed, who lives in Two Rivers, Wisconsin, where venomous snakes are not much of a threat. While deforestation, human sprawl, and climate change have heightened the danger from snakes attacks in recent years, research on antivenom has not kept pace with demand. This is a bigger problem than the first world realizes, said Jacob Glanville, founder and chief executive of Centavax, a company that aims to produce broad-spectrum vaccines, and lead author on the study. Dr. Glanville and his colleagues found that two powerful antibodies from Mr. Freed's blood, when combined with a drug that blocks neurotoxins, protected mice from the venom of 19 deadly snake species of a large family found in different geographical regions. This is an extraordinary feat, according to experts not involved in the work. Most antivenoms can counter the venom from just one or a few related snake species from one region. The study suggests that cocktails of antitoxins may successfully prevent deaths and injuries from all snake families, said Nicholas Casewell, a researcher at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine in England. Quote, the principles of the study can definitely be applied to other snakes. We won't go on. It goes into his whole history with snakes and getting bit and all this type of thing. But I thought it was a fascinating thing. It's just one of those, like, hey, humanity's moving forward. And that is true. In the first world, there's not a lot of poisonous snake species in developed countries because they're usually very far north. However, venomous snakes are definitely, they're in the south. Arkansas has several. And in tropical regions, in most, especially the equatorial part of the world, this is a huge problem. Like, people, even in Australia, people get got by snakes all the time. Like I said, 2.7 million bites, 100,000 deaths. I mean, in many countries, this is a huge public health problem. And if this poor fellow in Wisconsin has found a way to solve it, it's a good thing. Absolutely. Because it was a feel-good story. Again, I didn't do all of my prep, so we're just going through the stuff I have saved for today, just randomly. It's going to be fun. What else do we have here? Yes. Oh, the April jobs report. Yes. I was just working on an article that'll be out later this week, about the economy and recession, all this type of thing. And we have the jobs report in April was good. We don't need to get into it that much other than just to say the U.S. economy added a surprisingly strong 177,000 jobs in April, a slight slowdown from March's downwardly revised 185,000. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics data released on Friday, April's gain was stronger than the average pace of monthly job growth in the prior 3 months. Meanwhile, the unemployment rate was unchanged at 4.2%, a historically low level. Economists polled by data firm FactSet were expecting the economy to have added just 135,000 jobs last month, and the unemployment rate held at 4.2%. U.S. stocks moved higher Friday morning as investors digested the report. The Dow rose 490 points, or 1.2%. The broader S&P 500 rose 1.15%, and the tech-heavy NASDAQ composite gained 1%. April's jobs report marks another solid month of employment gains and a continuation of a historic expansion of the labor market, but that's on the backdrop of growing recession fears. Since staging a stunning recovery from the pandemic, the labor market has been a pillar of strength for the economy. It remains to be seen if that will persist amid the historically high levels of uncertainty sowed by President Trump's policies. Labor Secretary Lori Chavez DeRemer touted the jobs news on Friday, telling CNN's Pamela Brown, quote, everything in this jobs report was positive. Despite Americans' growing concerns about a recession, she said, quote, we see no reason that a recession is anywhere nearby, unquote. Meanwhile, Trump once again called on the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates after the jobs report. Quote, unemployment strong and much more good news, billions of dollars pour in from tariffs, Trump wrote in a post on Truth Social. Quote, consumers have been waiting for years to see pricing come down. No inflation. The Fed should lower its rate. However, there's no truth to Trump's claim that there's no inflation. Data released by the Commerce Department this week show that the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, the Fed's favorite inflation gauge, rose 2.3% in March from the year before. That's a slower pace of price hikes than February's 2.7% increase. The Fed is facing a unique dilemma over whether to lower interest rates as inflation remains above its 2% target, or to raise rates to brace for the inflationary impact from Trump's tariffs. Additionally, the administration's major policy shifts have already shown up in official labor figures. The federal government shed 9,000 jobs last month, down 26,000 since January, the Labor Department reported. Trump's Department of Government Efficiency has slashed jobs and eliminated or dramatically downsized a slew of federal agencies. Still, the government sector overall, including state and local, was up 10,000 jobs in April. Quote, we can push our recession concerns to another month, Seema Shah, chief global strategist at Principal Asset Management, said in commentary issued Friday. Quote, job numbers remain very strong, suggesting that there was an impressive degree of resiliency in the economy in play before the tariff shock, unquote. So there we are. Nice, good jobs report. So, yes, and it was surprising. I was anticipating a weak jobs report for April, but it was still good. So, I'm not necessarily surprised. It's still early days. Yeah, I was, in the article that's going to come out, I was saying that jobs reports are lagging indicators. So, there are some indicators that are forward-looking. They kind of give us a glimpse into the future. You see this for factory orders, because they are planned out so far. You see this in logistics shipping container orders, which are planned out months in advance. The jobs reports are there for what has happened. They're not what is coming. So I think it's, a difficult thing to rely on jobs reports right now. I'll be very interested to see what the revised April report is and what May is, to see if the economy is stronger than we think it is. But I also think, because of prices and uncertainty, it's going to not necessarily be a recession, but more of a vibe session, similar to what we had in 2023. So, next story. What have we got next? Oh, yes. The 20,000 UPS workers. Okay, so I saved this story because I know somebody who knows somebody who was one of the 20,000 UPS workers that were liberated. And it says here, UPS announced Tuesday that it would slash 20,000 jobs amid the economic chaos of President Donald Trump's tariffs, the New York Times reported. The move, which the company said is an attempt to cut costs in an uncertain market, comes as Trump's sky-high tariffs have driven some UPS customers to ship less, the Times reported. UPS now employs 490,000 workers, the majority of which are represented by the Teamsters Union. The company also said that it would not be able to update its revenue forecasts for 2025 due to, quote, macroeconomic uncertainty, unquote, as the tariffs have roiled markets with volatility. Last year, UPS cut 12,000 jobs. In the past few months, it has searched for ways to boost revenue, such as shipping fewer packages for Amazon, its largest customer, explaining that many of those deliveries are not profitable. The company said it plans to cut the number of Amazon deliveries it makes in half over the next year. The Times reported that UPS CEO Carol Tomei observed to investors Tuesday that the tariffs were especially hurting small companies that rely on imports from China, on which Trump has instituted a 145% import tax. So, we're going to see more of this as time goes on, especially around anything to do with logistics. So you're going to be looking for layoffs at ports, trucking, all this type of thing as shipments and things come to a standstill or severely reduced because of tariffs from China. Although I think we have a story coming up that China is interested in talking. So maybe we'll be able to solve this before things get too terrible, but the time to prevent that from happening is short. Oh yes, the Mike Waltz thing. Okay, so, speaking of sticking with stories, we all remember, about a month ago, we had the whole Pete Hegseth planning a war on Signal thing that came out it was in March, in the Atlantic, because that editor got added in by mistake. And so, it's been a little while, and now this guy is Mr. Waltz, who's the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, has been fired along with his assistant, and the National Security Advisor job has gone to Secretary of State Mark Rubio, who now has 4 jobs. It says here, U.S. President Donald Trump ousted his National Security Advisor Mike Waltz on Thursday and named Secretary of State Marco Rubio as interim replacement in the first major shakeup of Trump's inner circles since he took office in January. Trump, in a social media post, said he would nominate Waltz to be the next U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, adding that, quote, he has worked hard to put our nation's interests first, unquote. Earlier in the day, multiple sources said Trump had decided to remove Waltz from his national security post. The retired Army Green Beret and former Republican lawmaker from Florida had faced criticism inside the White House, particularly after he was caught up in a March scandal involving a Signal chat among top Trump national security aides. Rubio will be the first person since Henry Kissinger in the 1970s to hold the positions of Secretary of State and National Security Advisor simultaneously. Quote, when I have a problem, I call up Marco. He gets it solved, unquote. Trump said at a White House event earlier on Thursday. A person familiar with the matter said Trump wanted to get to the 100-day mark in his term before firing a cabinet-level official. News of the shakeup on Thursday was so abrupt the State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce learned about it from reporters at a briefing. The National Security Advisor is a powerful role that does not require Senate confirmation. Trump had 4 National Security Advisors in his first term: Michael Flynn, H.R. McMaster, John Bolton, and Robert O'Brien. Waltz's deputy Alex Wong, an Asia expert who was a State Department official focused on North Korea during Trump's first term, is also being forced from his post. 2 people familiar with the matters told Reuters. The Waltz ouster caps a month of personal turmoil within Trump's national security establishment. Since April 1st, at least 20 NSC staffers have been fired, the director of the National Security Agency has been dismissed, and 3 high-ranking Pentagon political appointees have been shown the door. The purges have seriously hurt morale in some areas of the national security establishment, according to several officials within or close to the administration. Some elements of the government are low on relevant national security expertise, and in some cases it has proven difficult to attract high-level talent, the officials added. The NSC is the main body used by presidents to coordinate security strategy, and its staff often make key decisions regarding America's approach to the world's most volatile conflicts. Waltz was blamed for accidentally adding the editor of The Atlantic magazine to a private thread describing details of an imminent U.S. bombing campaign in Yemen. The Atlantic subsequently reported on the internal discussion about the strikes, and it was memed a billion different times and became a social media sensation. And now, Mr. Waltz is on the unemployment line. This is not helping our jobs report. Moving right along. Oh, yes. So we have, this is interesting. So, so we have, this is the New Republic. RFK Jr.'s mental health bait and switch. The newly appointed HHS secretary is weaponizing legitimate anger at the failures of current psychiatric care to gut public services, abandon poor and disabled people, and expand the police state. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s confirmation as Secretary of Health and Human Services alongside President Trump's executive order launching the Make America Healthy Again Commission, or MAHA, signal that the Trump regime intends to radically reshape the nation's mental health policy. Their agenda presents itself as a critique of the over-medicalization of mental and social distress, calling for an investigation into the supposed threat posed by psychiatric medications. By doing so, it purports to challenge psychiatry's over-reliance on pharmaceuticals in place of addressing the root social and economic causes underlying much of the human suffering known today as mental illness. At first glance, the mission statement echoes long-standing progressive critiques of psychiatry by the fields known as social and critical psychiatry, which argue that psychiatric diagnoses often obscure the structural causes of suffering: poverty, social isolation, racism, homelessness, and exploitative labor conditions, for example, by reducing them to, quote, brain diseases, unquote. This transformation of social problems into medical diagnoses in turn feeds pharmaceutical profits and pathologizes oppressed groups. Meanwhile, the intense focus on neural networks, rather than on human needs for social networks, often exacerbates suffering rather than alleviating it. Here we go. Put bluntly, the MAHA agenda, irrespective of the varying intentions of its supporters, who include millions of diverse people failed by our current systems, is quickly being turned by the Trump administration into a eugenics campaign in the guise of reform. A cynical strategy to grant symbolic recognition of widespread pain and anger at failing U.S. mental health care as a perverse means of enabling material redistribution of resources away from redress of that suffering and instead into the pockets of the rich. And this also gets into, and I don't think this story covers it, but I might pick it back up later, is that and it also gets into the budget, which we'll get to. In reallocating, so it also gets into they're trying to look for the vaccine, the causes of autism being tied to vaccines, which there's no evidence for, but they're going to try to look for it anyway. And spend a lot of money on that, and that he says here he conjoins planned abandonment of poor and disabled groups with a neoliberal strategy of privatizing essential services, by thereby compelling individuals, charitable organizations, or public insurance to pay for-profit companies for basic care, corporations, and wealthy individuals that Kennedy can extract maximum wealth from these same populations even as they slowly suffer and die, whether from suicide, overdose, or preventable diseases born of homelessness or incarceration. It also says here, it also reminds us of his wellness farms, his repeated baseless claims that antidepressant medications are the cause of school shootings, and his advocacy for government wellness farms featuring forced labor, particularly targeting black children, as a supposed alternative to current psychiatric treatment, for example, conjoin the worst of anti-psychiatry with police state paradigms reminiscent of policies from Nazi Germany and Chinese re-education camps to ongoing American mass incarceration. Here's what's entertaining, is in the new budget, they're getting rid of Job Corps. That's Trump's proposing getting rid of Job Corps, which is literally, job training for underprivileged youth, and it can be an alternative sentencing program for young people and all this sort of thing. And so it goes on for a while, but the fact that they want to, kind of go after psychiatry, but not in a way that would actually help people, is honestly, it's letting the crazies run the asylum. There are some people who should not be medicated. And if we're going to unmedicate them, we should be prepared for absolute chaos. It says here, but simply stripping people of access to medications and psychiatric care, as Kennedy and Trump threatened to do, without addressing the underlying suffering to which these treatments are a response, would provoke a political health disaster. While the rich would continue to pay privately for whatever they may need or want, and would turn to the black market as needed, approximately 100 million Americans who are uninsured or underinsured would be cut off from essential care. Millions would suffer from dangerous medication withdrawal and sudden withdrawal of social connections upon which they've come to depend, and sudden increases in need for expensive and often traumatic hospitalization. Many would likely die by suicide or overdose. I mean, proposals are proposals, policy's one thing, and these are separate things. One of the things that we are sometimes guilty of in the media is by conflating a floated proposal with actual implementation. However, I think his crunchy idea of trying to say, oh, the problem is we just got to get people off these terrible medications and everything will work itself out. He's never met someone who's schizophrenic or who's bipolar, or people who have anger issues or have other problems that he's obviously never met any of these people, because if he had, he would know some people are much more nicer and much more functional when they're medicated. And the reality is a lot of people, and people do this before they get on medication, is they then go and turn to illegal drugs, which we consume enough of in this country, and you end up with overdoses and things like that. It's when you start trying to screw with people's health like this, if you don't have very solid and specific plans, you get what happened with heroin after the opioid crisis. Historical context. Let's roll the beat back. So, opioids get prescribed in mass amounts. It becomes a huge problem. People are high and doctor shopping and going to pill mills and all this type of thing. Can't have that. Okay, we'll ban those drugs. We'll jail the doctors who prescribe them, get rid of the pill mills, all this type of thing. Here's, however, the problem. You now have millions who are addicted to painkillers. Where are those people going to go to get their fix or manage their withdrawal symptoms? They aren't. So glad you asked about that. They're not. Here's what they're going to do. They're going to start doing heroin. And that's what happened. And it killed 500,000 people. Ask Purdue. They got sued almost out of existence for it. When you're going to do this sort of thing, it has to be managed in such a very careful way. Because if it's not, it becomes absolutely dangerous. So I think, as someone who can be affected by these policies, I have a lot of concerns about what he's getting up to with this, because if it's a situation where he's, convinced that all of us are, just terrible people who, need to be sent to re-education camps, that's, it's not going to be a fun time for anybody involved. Yes. This is a good one. This headline is a bit caustic even for AP. It's not as bad as this headline would lead you to believe. So we start out, the Justice Department ended a decades-old school desegregation order. Others are expected to fall. Here's the situation. When the Justice Department lifted a school desegregation order in Louisiana this week, officials called its continued existence, quote, a historical wrong, unquote, and suggested that others dating to the civil rights movement should be reconsidered. The end of the 1966 legal agreement with Plaquemines Parish Schools, announced Tuesday, shows the Trump administration is, quote, getting America refocused on our bright future, Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon said. Inside the Justice Department, officials appointed by President Donald Trump have expressed desire to withdraw from any other desegregation orders they see as an unnecessary burden on schools, according to a person familiar with the issue who was granted anonymity because they were not authorized to speak publicly. Dozens of school districts across the South remain under court-enforced agreements dictating steps to work towards integration, decades after the Supreme Court struck down racial segregation in education. Some see court orders' endurance as a sign of government never eradicated segregation, while officials in Louisiana and at some schools see the orders as bygone relics that should be wiped away. The Justice Department has opened a wave of cases in the 1960s after Congress unleashed the department to go after schools that resisted desegregation. Known as consent decrees, the orders can be lifted when districts prove they have eliminated segregation and its legacy. The Trump administration called the Plaquemines case an example of administrative neglect. The district in the Mississippi River Delta Basin in southeast Louisiana was found to have integrated in 1975, but the case was to stay under the court's watch for another year. The judge died the year, and the court record, quote, appears to be lost to time. Given that this case has stayed for half a century with zero action by the court, the parties or any third party, the parties are satisfied that the United States' claims have been fully resolved, according to a joint filing from the Justice Department and the Office of Louisiana Attorney General Liz Murrell. Plaquemines Superintendent Shelley Ritt said the Justice Department officials still visited every year as recently as 2023 and requested data on topics including hiring and discipline. She said the paperwork was a burden for a district of fewer than 4,000 students. It was hours of compiling the data, she said. Louisiana, quote, got its act together decades ago, unquote, said Leo Terrell, Senior Counsel of the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. In a statement, he said the dismissal corrects the historical wrong, adding, quote, it's past time to acknowledge how far we've come, unquote. Murrell asked the Justice Department to close other school orders in her state. In a statement, she vowed to work with Louisiana schools to help them, quote, put the past in the past. Civil rights activists say that's the wrong move. Many orders have only been loosely enforced in recent decades, but that doesn't mean problems are solved, said Jonathan Smith, who worked in the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division during President Joe Biden's administration. It probably means the opposite, that the school district remains segregated, and in fact most of these districts are now more segregated today than they were in 1954, said Smith, who's now Chief of Staff and General Counsel for the National Center for Youth Law. More than 130 school systems are under the Justice Department's desegregation orders, according to records in a court filing this year. The vast majority are in Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi, with smaller numbers in states like Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina. Some other districts remain under separate desegregation agreements with the Education Department. The orders can include a range of remedies, from busing requirements to district policies allowing students in predominantly black schools to transfer to predominantly white ones. The agreements are between the school districts and the U.S. government, but other parties can ask the court to intervene when signs of segregation resurface. In 2020, the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund invoked a consent decree in Alabama's lead school district when it stopped offering school meals during the COVID-19 pandemic. The civil rights group said it disproportionately hurt black students in violation of the desegregation order. The district agreed to resume meals. Last year, Louisiana School Board closed a predominantly black elementary school near a petrochemical facility after the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund said it disproportionately exposed black students to health risks. The board made the decision after the group filed a motion invoking a decades-old desegregation order at St. John the Baptist Parish. And so it goes. The basic summary of all of this is that these are very old orders in certain places to make sure desegregation was undone. The Trump administration is saying that's old news. This happened decades ago. This isn't a problem now. And some people are saying, no, maybe we still need those. I think a lot of the desegregation infrastructure is kind of unnecessary at this point. I don't feel like people care that much anymore. I mean, obviously there are still racists around. There are obviously still some systemic issues to work through as a society. I have confronted that in the last several years in my own life. I don't necessarily think that you can end up with you're going to end up with these desegregation problems in these school districts. I think the fact that they're still there and around, and you could petition, if there's a problem later, you could petition again later for that, I think could be quite interesting. But I think going through these and looking at what the state of things are and if it makes sense to move on from those types of things is important. And I'll give you a more recent example. The Supreme Court allowed 13 states in the South to no longer have to report changes to their voting laws to the Justice Department. Because of the voting inequalities before the Voting Rights Act of 1964, several states were required to, if they were going to change their voting laws, it had to get clearance from the Justice Department first. 3 or 4 years ago, the Supreme Court said, well, that's old and out of date, let it go. And being in mind that they did not feel like there was any more political priority to stop black people from voting. I feel like this is the same thing. A lot of this infrastructure was very necessary at the time. It probably isn't as necessary now, and that means I think to some degree we can move on, but I think it's also important to continue to work for educational equity, if that makes any sense. I think we should continue to work for educational equity, but we don't necessarily need these orders. But I thought it was interesting because the narrative is going to be Trump's bringing back desegregation. Well, not quite. They're getting rid of some old infrastructure that probably could do with some review at a minimum and possibly changing things around if it's really necessary. So, again, giving you the headlines before the headlines. This is a very short story. Warren Buffett announced at his shareholders meeting last week he's going to step down at the end of the year, which is huge. The Oracle of Omaha is getting out of the game. He's still going to be the chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, but he's getting out of the day-to-day operations. His partner, Charlie Munger, died last year. I imagine that affects his decision-making a great deal. He's turning over day-to-day to Greg Abel by the end of the year, and he criticized Trump's trade policies. Warren E. Buffett has been at the forefront of American capitalism for decades as the chief executive of Berkshire Hathaway, the conglomerate he built into a $1.1 trillion colossus. By the end of the year, he's preparing to give up that role. Mr. Buffett said at Berkshire's annual shareholder meeting on Saturday that he plans to ask the company's board to approve making Gregory Abel, his heir apparent, the chief executive by the end of the year. Mr. Abel would have, quote, the final word when it comes to the company's operations, how it invests, and more. Mr. Buffett, 94, told the tens of thousands of Berkshire shareholders at the meeting in Omaha. But Mr. Buffett added that, quote, he would still hang around and conceivably be useful in a few cases, unquote. He will remain chairman of Berkshire, turning that role over to his son Howard Buffett upon his death, and remains the company's single biggest shareholder with roughly 14% stake that's worth $164 billion. Mr. Buffett's plan, which he said had been known to only two of his children who sit on the company's board, Howard and Susan Buffett, was greeted by a minute-long standing ovation by Berkshire shareholders. Mr. Abel, 62, appeared surprised by his boss's announcement. After the announcement, several board members attending Berkshire's meeting hugged each other. So, that's been going around in financial circles. It's an end of an era, for sure. He's been, as far as financiers and business people go, he has been at the forefront. He has single-handedly saved whole companies. He has been the J.P. Morgan of our time. And for him to hang it up is, it's end of an age. This story. This is good. So, I think there might be another one in here, but this'll do. So China announced it has found strong evidence that COVID-19 originated in the United States. It says here, Beijing announced the United States of being the original source of COVID-19, alleging that Washington is attempting to deflect responsibility by politicizing the search for the virus's origins, according to the New York Post report. The accusation comes after U.S. President Donald Trump reiterated claims that the virus was leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. In response, China released a white paper dismissing the lab leak theory as, quote, extremely unlikely, unquote, and suggesting that COVID-19 may have originated in the United States prior to the outbreak in Wuhan. Quote, the U.S. government, instead of facing squarely its failure in response to COVID-19 and reflecting on its shortcomings, has tried to shift the blame and divert people's attention by shamelessly politicizing SARS-CoV-2 origins tracing, Chinese officials stated. Citing unspecified substantial evidence, China claimed that the virus had been circulating in the U.S. before it was officially detected and accused the U.S. of hampering international cooperation by politicizing the issue. The remarks follow updates on the White House's COVID-19 webpage earlier this month, which emphasized the theory that a lab leak-related incident, possibly involving gain-of-function research, was the most likely origin of the virus. This aligns with findings by the CIA and other U.S. agencies, including the FBI and a House committee, which have also leaned towards the lab leak hypothesis, although often, quote, with low confidence. In contrast, China referred to its previous joint study with the World Health Organization, which concluded that COVID-19 likely originated from bats and was transmitted through humans through an intermediate host. The Chinese white paper also criticized the U.S. pandemic response, claiming it weakened global efforts to combat the virus and contributed to instability in international public health systems. China, which has itself faced global scrutiny over its early handling of the outbreak, argued that the U.S. must respond to, quote, numerous questions over its conduct, unquote, and stop ignoring international concerns. I think that's Chinese propaganda. I don't think there's anything to that. Although, I mean, the lab leak thing with COVID, I wrote this in an article entitled Our Politicized Pandemic. As I think the lab leak situation does have some certain validity, and I think there's better evidence for that. And honestly, if China's so sure it started here, where are the receipts, China? Where are the receipts? What's your substantial evidence? If you want to put that out there, we'll talk to you. Until then, this was some propaganda written in a very nice office somewhere in Beijing. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, well, this is interesting. Well, this is a bit of cultural news. I remember why I say this. This is a bit of cultural news. Older books are selling, newer ones aren't. Old music is all the rage. Newer artists can barely get played. Older video games and old movie franchises suck up all the attention. In almost every field, old art is strangling new art. Let's start with music, and it goes through new music in sales. In 2024, catalog made up a whopping 73% of music sales. New music is increasingly irrelevant to the music industry. You can see this in places other than sales data. What's the hottest industry trend? Buying up the rights of retired or dead artists. In book publishing, the front list books released this year accounted for 48% of sales in 2005. That's dropped all the way to 30%. The backlist now makes up 70% of book sales. The movie industry is almost comically reliant on sequels, spin-offs, remakes, and franchises. In 2005, they were less than half of box office revenue. Now they're more than 80% of all theater spending. Take a look at the 15 highest grossing movies from last year. You have to go all the way down to number 15 to find something that's not a spin-off, or sequel, or previous film IP. And he goes on and on, the thread goes on and on. I saved this because I thought it was interesting. I'd kind of thought about this, but I hadn't really realized it. Like, that even in games, people are playing old video games as well. It's like everything old is new again, and everything new is irrelevant. And I remember someone saying, that it had to do with accessibility. Thanks to streaming, other things like that, all of this stuff is available to us in a way that just wasn't, possible before. Especially given, like, for when I was growing up, you had CDs. If Discovery was primarily over the radio. Yes, I know, the radio. And so you would hear a song on the radio, or your friend would play it for you, and you go buy the CD. And so, like, you were kind of, you were into the music of your time that you were discovering that was on the radio, whatever have you. Your parents might introduce you to something, or older family members. But your selection of that was limited. It was also hard to find. You had to go into the used record shop, get vinyl, get CDs, get cassettes, whatever have you. Now, I can look up anything that my mom was listening to in the 70s on Apple Music from my phone. Same thing with books. You used to have to go to the library or use bookstores. Yes, used bookstores to find old books, and it was usually word of mouth recommendation. Books are still sold primarily by word of mouth recommendation. Now, especially if you are into audiobooks with Audible, or you're into reading ebooks, this type of thing, it's immediately available. If someone tells you about a book, you can go, there's 5 sites I have to go find old books. And with the used market, thanks to eBay and online, is better than ever because you can drop it in the mail to somebody. So nowadays, we're consuming the breadth and depth of everything. Music, games, books, everything all at once. How is something new gonna have its moment when it's not just competing with everything else that's new, but also everything else that came before it that's now suddenly effortlessly accessible? And as it turns out, I don't think it has to do anything with AI, despite this person's comment. But I do think it has a lot to do with accessibility. This stuff is very accessible now. All this stuff is extremely accessible. And that is, I would say, very different than even in the recent past, thanks to the internet, streaming, all this type of thing. Although I do love some of these comments, like, well, if new art was overwhelmingly shitty, maybe it might have a chance, sort of thing. There's definitely, there's an accessibility story here that I think is also very important, but it is shocking to see it in the numbers and in charts, to be kind of like, the accessibility of everything is just so there and so present. So, let's see. Restoring equality of opportunity in the Marathon. Yes, here we go. All right. So this is a new executive order from last week, restoring the equality of opportunity and meritocracy. What this does, and I saved this from last week because it has to do with disparate impact, and I want to talk about this. Um, so disparate. So here's the executive order. Here we go. A key tool of this movement is disparate impact liability, which holds that a near insurmountable presumption of unlawful discrimination exists where there are any differences in outcome in certain circumstances among different races, sexes, or similar group, even if there's no facially discriminatory policy or practice or discriminatory intent involved, even if everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed. Now, remember that. And that everyone should be treated equal under the law. Now let's go to this Twitter thread that explains what all this is. So, what is disparate impact? Disparate impact is the legal doctrine by which discrimination can be shown not by specific actions against specific people, but rather by a statistical showing that Group B does worse than Group A under what appears to be neutral criteria. The point of disparate impact is that no actual discriminatory actions have to be shown and no discriminatory intent has to be proven. If B does worse than A, that's enough to at least get into court. I'm not going to get into the various and sundry reasons why this doctrine developed, since I don't have time for that, nor do I want to have a debate about the doctrine itself, and that's your warning. I will block those who try to do some replies. I'm only stating what it is. So, and this gets into this long time equal opportunity case against Sheetz, which is a gas station chain here in the East, mostly in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Maryland. And this case was brought against them and the argument was that Sheetz tended to hire not enough black people, and that black people were not being hired at Sheetz, and that this constituted not direct direct discrimination, but that there was this disparate impact on people of color because Sheetz was not a place that they could get hired. And there was no evidence that Sheetz had racist policies. It had no idea that that it had, any sort of policies that were discriminatory. It was just that's who they happened to hire. And it says that an aspect of the case, and he mentions it here, is that Sheetz, like numerous of other employers, asks applicants if they have a criminal history, then runs a criminal background check, and if information in that comes back with a conviction history that is against certain criteria, the person isn't hired. The entirety of the case for racial discrimination is that minorities fail the background check at a higher rate than white people. Here's the thing. The complaint itself admits that those numbers are consistent with published criminal justice statistics. Sheetz does many things very well. Sheetz does not, however, run the United States criminal justice system. Sheetz has absolutely no control over the criminal justice system. As the EEOC admitted, there are no allegations that Sheetz is motivated by race in hiring. So, in the case is all disparate impact, that even without direct discrimination, the fact that they're using that is unfair, which also gets into trying to stop employers from asking people and doing criminal background checks on people. So this case was finally settled in favor of Sheetz. And again, it goes on. It's a whole thing. We're not going to get super into it. I could probably do a whole video on just the history of that. But in response to that, the executive order has come along also trying to get rid of disparate impact liability. And it says here is the policy of the United States to eliminate the use of disparate impact liability in all contexts to the maximum degree possible to avoid violating the Constitution, federal civil rights laws, and basic American ideals. And it gets rid of certain presidential actions, including rules of the Department of Justice from the 60s, 1966, 1973, and several others in here as well. And so that, and also getting rid of some other previous executive orders from 1980 around discrimination. Combining this with the story we already went through about the desegregation orders in the South, what this all is kind of taken together as one giant thing is I would say, an overall dismantling of the civil rights apparatus that was created in the 1960s to try to even out a lot of the inherent inequality that was in American society as a result of explicit Jim Crow laws in the South and implicit Jim Crow behavior in the North and out West. And what they're slowly doing is they're basically getting rid of the legal basis for people going to court for this stuff. And basically leaving people with no legal recourse and leaving it open, to, whatever companies do decide to or to not do, or people decide to or to not do. A lot of people will say, yeah, it's time. Our country isn't, racist anymore. We've moved on from this. No one thinks like this way anymore. It's time to move on, so let's move on. And notice how they titled it Restoring, as if this didn't exist before. We're bringing back equality of opportunity meritocracy so that if you're good and you'll be hired. If not, you're out of luck. And on the surface, this seems like a good idea. But when we haven't fully addressed a lot of the systemic racial issues in this country, and I don't necessarily think any of this is a bad idea, but I think it definitely gives some concern about how discrimination may raise its ugly head in times moving forward, and why it may give people an excuse to be discriminatory and will have no legal basis to do anything about it. That's the real worry, is that we're not necessarily going to have any legal recourse when discrimination crops up, and that discrimination is going to probably very quietly and very subtly be put back into society. And judging by some of the absolutely awful racist things I read on Twitter from people who talk about, oh yeah, I can't go into a city and I moved to the suburbs and, no one wants to take trains because of, black people and all this type of thing, and calling black people low IQ and all this sort of thing. I think it's basically giving people permission to separate themselves from undesirables in society. And I think ultimately, while on the surface this stuff is probably a quote-unquote good thing and will probably be okay for the vast majority, anybody who chooses to want to not hire certain people or whatever have you are now going to have a perfect basis to do so, and there'll be no legal recourse to stop them. Same thing goes with the school story. And that should be concerning to us all. Especially women. Women benefit from these laws a lot. If a shop decides to not hire women at all, women can't sue anymore. I mean, if I were white women, I'd be very concerned, because white women use these laws almost more than black people do. People don't know that, but it's true. I mean, yeah. I mean, that, yes. it is, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of this sort of quiet... And I write this in my essay, Racism 2.0, which is available at CameronJournal.com in my What the Hell is Going On collection. Modern racism is not whites only, with signs in a shop. It's subtle. It's hard to find. It's hard to see. And that makes it hard to get rid of as well. And these sorts of things make it a lot easier to root this stuff out. And getting rid of this apparatus makes the subtlety of modern American racism almost impossible to get rid of. And I think that's a terrible shame. I'm not doing the Apple story because it was in the newsletter. We already talked about this. We're past the hour. I'm trying to get through all of this. We'll do that next week. Oh, this is the Hannah Dugan thing. We should talk about Hannah Dugan. Okay. So, we touched this briefly earlier in the story, but let's get into this thread here, because this is really good. So, a week ago today, FBI agents arrested Judge Hannah Dugan on courthouse grounds on outrageous charges. Immediately, Trump officials like Kaish Patel and Pam Bondi began to celebrate, but this is not going well for them. It's going to age like milk on a Miami sidewalk. Let's review what happened. The arrest of Judge Dugan stemmed from a Keystone Cops type episode that took place a week earlier when immigration enforcement attempted to arrest an individual in Dugan's courtroom. Judge Dugan sent the enforcers out, telling them to talk to the chief judge. Then she sent the individual out via the jury door. The FBI now wants to prosecute her for supposedly obstructing a U.S. agency and concealing an individual to prevent an arrest, but there's a problem. The government's case hinges, among other problems, on the idea that the choice of the jury door showed an attempt to evade authorities. But as the FBI complaint details, The door led to, quote, where the agents were waiting, unquote. Let's discuss. So, and then it goes, the attorneys Jeff Mandel and Norm Eisen further summarized the case in a great Journal Sentinel op-ed. According to the complaint, Judge Dugan directed federal agents to clear their warrant and activities with the chief judge of the Milwaukee County Circuit Court, and she directed the object of the warrant into a public hallway where the federal agents were waiting. If the agents had wanted to arrest him immediately, they could have. Instead, after a bit of bumbling, they arrested their target outside of the courthouse. At most, Judge Dugan may have caused the administration's agents a minor inconvenience and a slight detour. This inconvenience does not become an obstruction of justice, no matter how much the Trump administration pounds the table. That's the government's case. You'd think the higher-ups would be nervous about staking reputations on such a hole-ridden foundations, but no. Immediately after the arrest, FBI Director Kash Patel celebrated in a deleted and later reposted tweet. Shortly thereafter, Attorney General Pam Bondi appeared on Fox News bragging about the case. Both of these actions represent a problem for the administration, because federal DOJ policies prohibit officials from making public statements that could affect the outcome of a criminal proceeding, as Norm Eisen and Lisa Pub Citizen point out in this video here. This wasn't about law enforcement. The arrest of Judge Dugan was a stunt calculated to intimidate judges. Condemnation and public protests erupted immediately. And the governor in Wisconsin wrote a statement, and Senator Baldwin had a statement out, and Congress people had statements out. And this is, as I kind of said before when we mentioned the arrest of officials and the intimidation of officials and potentially arresting people and all that sort of thing that we talked about earlier in the hour. And Ben Winkler is the chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. This is, we're gonna see more of this. Like Tom Homan has already said he wants to do more of this, and Trump likes it too. And so this is the start of it. This is not the beginning. This is the start of it. And the fact that all other politicians are coming out to support her and all this type of thing is quite telling. And the fact that protests broke out immediately is quite telling. The vitriol from the right is very interesting, and I think people are enjoying the calling for blood. They're, let's go after these judges, let's go after these people, because the violent mob wants to violent mob, and the system is not letting the violent mob, and the violent mob is mad about not being able to violent mob, and this is all an example of that situation. And I just wanted to bring this up one more time because we already talked about this, and so, again, if I'd actually done my show prep and had all the stories lined up, we could have talked about this a while ago. But we're freewheeling and being spontaneous this week. So, I hear a comment. I can think of a few other people in history that loved arresting judges. Yeah, there's been a few. A lot of dictators and authoritarians. A lot of those. It's a theme. It's a theme. We're gonna close on. We're not doing. Well, we'll maybe come back to Oklahoma. We're not doing. We will close on the budget. I have a Twitter thread coming out about this, but we'll start with the NEA and we'll go back to the budget. The president's budget proposal calls for the GOP dream. This has been the priority of the Republican Party since the 1980s. Eliminating the National Endowment for the Arts. And the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Institute of Museum and Library Services. It's finally happening for them. They're finally doing it. They put it in the budget and it might actually happen. In President Trump's budget, President Trump proposed eliminating the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities in the budget he released on Friday, taking aim once again at two agencies that he tried and failed to get rid of during his first term. The endowments, along with the Institute of Museum and Library Services, were among the entities listed in a section titled Small Agency Eliminations in his budget blueprint for the next fiscal year. Now, here's the dangerous part. The NEA, in preparation for this, has already stopped giving out grants to local theaters, which is already having a huge impact on arts and arts funding nationwide. So just bear that in mind. The proposal to eliminate the endowments drew a quick and furious reaction from Democrats. One, Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island, vowed to fight the plan to eliminate the NEA tooth and nail. Representative Shelley Pingree of Maine, who serves as the top Democrat on the House subcommittee overseeing the NEA, said in an interview that Mr. Trump, quote, was making a broad-based attack on the arts, both for funding and content. She cited his proposals to eliminate the endowments as well as his takeover of the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington and his efforts to influence the Smithsonian Institution. We were able to restore the funding last time, she said. But as you know, based on the first 100 days of this administration, they're in no mood to keep much of the government alive anymore, and their attack is focused on everything, and the arts have already got a bullseye on their back. At the Kennedy Center, the new leaders installed by Mr. Trump have worked to cut costs and reduce staff. On Friday, they dismissed another 21 employees in several departments, according to two people with knowledge of the firings. Since Mr. Trump took over the center, roughly 40 of its staff members have lost their jobs. And it goes on to what the NEA does, and I'm going to bounce back to the budget, although I heard a comment. That probably doesn't even cover the tax cut for Musk. No, it really doesn't. And here's the sad thing, is they're always wanting to cut, let me add this tip here, they're always wanting to cut arts funding as if that's what's causing the budget overrun. It's not. The NEA's budget is minuscule compared to everything else. I mean, even when you take together food stamps, welfare, arts funding, all this type of thing, all of the education, it comprises such a tiny portion of the budget. The bulk of the budget is Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and defense. Say it with me now. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and defense, like a prayer. That's 3/4 of federal spending. Everything else is what's left. That's how small it is. Yeah, actually, the birthday military parade is going to cost $90 million. Which you could buy a lot of NEA funding for $90 million. You could buy a lot of theater, for $90 million. Like, it's, yeah, we've spent already on Trump's golf trips, I think they're up to about $25 million. I mean, again, if we just reallocate, we can pay for the NEA. But this is the point. I mean, this is how it goes. This is how this stuff adds up. And so getting into the rest of the budget, here's the embarrassing part. And I have a thread coming out of the budget. The president's $1.7 trillion discretionary budget blueprint would cut $163 billion. That's nothing. And, well, after his tax cuts, the deficit will still be bigger. Like, it's still going to be, like, and this is out of the discretionary, so there's still another $1 trillion of required spending, much of which is military, and other things, healthcare stuff, Medicare, so all this type of thing. Like, we're still not actively doing anything to really cut the deficit. And it says here that Trump's budget proposal calls for $160 billion in cuts across the government. And it says it's a record low for domestic funding programs. So if you look between 1986, and it gets real slim in the 90s, and then kind of builds up in the 2000s, and hits kind of a peak here about, 2010, maybe 9, 8, somewhere in there. And then we have kind of a flat line, and then it's been decreasing, through Trump 1, Biden, and now. And this is kind of a big drop below 2% of GDP. Issuing his first budget proposal since returning to office, Mr. Trump sketched out a dim view of Washington. His blueprint depicted many core government functions as woke, weaponized, wasteful, or radical. That's a good alliteration. As the president looked to justify his request that Congress chop domestic spending to its lowest level in the modern era. Mr. Trump proposed cutting funding for some law enforcement, including the FBI. He called on lawmakers to slash money meant to police tax evasion at the Internal Revenue Service. He recommended striking billions in funds that help finance clean water projects, and the president reserved some of his deepest cuts for education, health, and science, including the National Institutes of Health and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which would see their budgets cut by around half. Democrats immediately rebuked Mr. Trump for his proposal. Senator Chuck Schumer of New York, the Senate Minority Leader, called it heartless and an all-out assault on hardworking Americans. Even some Republicans took issue with Mr. Trump's budget, although others like Speaker Mike Johnson endorsed the blueprint. Mr. Trump also asked Congress to reduce and eliminate billions of dollars in federal aid to help the poorest Americans. For one, the White House called for reconfiguring federal programs that provide rental assistance to low-income families, cutting aid by more than $26 billion in this fiscal year. That will also basically eliminate Section 8 funding, by the way. and the administration proposed a termination of a federal initiative backed by some Republicans that aids needy families in paying their monthly heating bills. That would be LEAP. One of the few spending increases included in the budget, Mr. Trump asked lawmakers to bolster spending of the Department of Homeland Security for more than $43 billion, furthering his work to crack down on immigration, conduct deportations, and build a wall along the U.S.-Mexican border. The president also requested more than $1 trillion for the military next fiscal year. That's all required spending. But he asked lawmakers to approve that increase essentially on a one-time basis as part of a broader legislative package due later this year, meant to advance the president's tax agenda. The approach angered some Republicans who signaled they would pursue a larger increase to military spending as part of the yearly process to fund government agencies and programs. Quote, "It is peculiar how much time the president's advisors spend talking about restoring peace through strength, given how apparently unwilling they've been to invest accordingly in the national defense or in other critical instruments of national power," said Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, and the Republicans' former Senate leader, in a statement that denounced the administration's, quote, "accounting gimmicks," unquote. For Mr. Trump, the budget served to formalize his conservative vision and his disruptive reorganization of government, a campaign that has already shuttered entire agencies and dismissed thousands of federal workers without the explicit approval of Congress. Some of Mr. Trump's proposed military increases could benefit Elon Musk, the tech billionaire who has advised Mr. Trump on cost-cutting as part of the Department of Government Efficiency. Mr. Trump's budget supported the creation of a new missile defense shield and a renewed campaign for, quote, U.S. space dominance, unquote. Both are areas in which Mr. Musk and his rocket company SpaceX could stand to win major contracts funded by any increase in spending. And as we see here in this lovely graphic, state and international programs way down, Homeland Security way up, and everything else, agriculture, commerce, interior, SBA, labor, everything down, 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 down. And then energy, veterans affairs, transportation, defense, and homeland security are all up. So, we'll hear more about this and cover it more as time goes on. It's important to remember this is not final. The president gets to recommend a budget, but he does not the budget make. It's up to Congress to make the budget. Presidents send all sorts of things to Congress for budget, and then Congress is kind of like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. So, but I wanted to go over some of the cuts that are happening because it's important to look at what they're doing, especially given the fact they've already eliminated a lot of aspects of the government, and a lot of funding stuff will just simply go away anyway. Things like the Department of Education. So, that's the news this week. It's a lot of headlines. If you want to hear me wrap up all these stories on Saturday, go sign up for the newsletter. CameronJoel.com/newsletter. Make sure to sign up and get that delivered to your inbox. Make sure to follow me on all your favorite social media so you can see clips and things throughout the week. And all sorts of other fun stuff that I post, including my big threads and all the latest content. All the latest content we're posting at CameronJoel.com. So, and please make sure to recommend to friends, family, others who might be into the news, want better, more quality information delivered to you in an honest way without a lot of BS. So, I will say this, of everything that's happened, just remember, we did not get here by accident. We did not get here by accident. All of this is intentional. Real people are doing this. This is all real stuff going on. Take a deep breath and relax. And I will see you next Monday on the Cameron Joel News Hour. I will see you on Saturday on the newsletter. Catch me on social media in the meantime, CameronJoel.com. I'll see you all next week. Good night.